Hello and welcome to my podcast called Innervation. Innervation was inspired by my previous podcast, Silence, where over the course of 2 years, I spoke every week with a total of 100 women from science, technology, engineering and mathematics, or STEM. I kept all of those guests anonymous so that they could talk openly and honestly about their lives. We discussed their experiences, what they've learned along their life journeys, and their hopes and ideas for living fulfilling and contented lives. Because their identities were always kept safe, the conversations on Silence were always so raw and transparent, and we didn't just talk about being women in STEM, but about everything. The topics that tended to come up between us were also the same topics that I'm asked about after I've given a talk in schools and colleges, or the same topics that I discuss with my mentees or my friends and family. So it seemed clear to me that there are certain topics out there that are really important to all of us, but we only tend to discuss them amongst a very small inner circle. So what I've done is I've sifted through all the episodes of Silence to bring you my favourite sound bites on these very fragile topics. And each week on Innervation, I'll be reflecting on the perspectives that came up on Silence that I feel are actually pearls of wisdom that I found particularly provoking, inspiring and empowering, in the hope that they resonate with you too. This week is called Stop Apologising. Now, the reason why I wanted to do a topic like this is because what I find, particularly amongst women, but, guys, this may be the case with you, is that we're always apologising. We apologise when we're wrong, we apologise when we're right, we apologise when we fail, but we also apologise when we succeed, as though we should be constantly feeling bad about who we are. Now, I don't think it's just reserved for women. I think there are certain people that apologise for just being themselves. And it's probably tied up with shame, this concept of feeling bad as opposed to guilt, where you actually feel bad because you've done something wrong. Whereas with shame, you feel bad just for existing. And I think a lot of women, and certainly people in minorities, often feel sorry for not fitting in with the crowd. And that's certainly been my experience as a woman in STEM, but also as a person of ethnic minority, that I'm always feeling bad and sorry for not being like everybody else. So I wanted to do an episode on Innervation about this topic and just see what other women in STEM have had to say from Silence about this topic. So when I was sifting through episodes of Silence, I definitely found a high concentration of my guests talking about how they apologise for everything. And there were so many quotes to choose from. But, this idea of apologising isn't just something that happens in adulthood. I think we're conditioned from a really early age to be apologetic for being female, for being different, for being unconventional. And it's the way we're raised. This from episode 19.
But I see my daughter, actually. She's 9, and I already see it from the media that she watches. I already see her apologizing for her actions in a way, and that's something I do too. Oftentimes I'll be like, I'm sorry I did that. I catch myself saying sorry all the time. I'm like, oh gosh, stop apologizing for just being a human being.
It's such a big problem, and it's something that I've really been thinking about a lot recently as I do more and more things, because I used to spend a lot of time apologizing for absolutely everything. And now I'm getting to a point in my career, or maybe it's my age, where I don't have the time and the energy to keep apologizing for everything I do. When I screw up, of course, I'm sorry about that, but I often do everything to the best of my ability. So when I do make mistakes, I'm kind of not sorry, because if I was to do it over and over again, or if I was to have my time again, I'd probably make the same mistake because I simply didn't know. I think, I should be apologizing for not learning from mistakes and not learning from failure. But I don't think we should ever apologize for making mistakes when we simply didn't know how to do it better. And I think by apologizing, we actually stop ourselves from learning, because we put all of our energy into saying sorry rather than channeling that energy into a way where we can learn from what went wrong. And this is what my guest from episode 100 alludes to. She was my final guest on Silence, and I loved her perspective on this.
I think going back, we were very apologetic for who we were. Oh, I'm an engineer. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm an engineer. You know, I do science. You know, it's really embarrassing. I better not talk about it. You know, gone are those days, and now it is cool to be geeky in inverted commas. You know, I like the fact that I have boxes of broken things, which I've always had. I have boxes of broken things, which I take to schools and show the kids and get them to figure out what the broken thing is or was, because there's a story behind every broken thing.
I do hope we are moving into an era where we can find enlightenment or learning or evolution in failure and making mistakes, because there is so much to gain from learning from mistakes. And, you know, we do live in a society where every time you make a faux pas, it's like, you know, really highlighted, and people and press make a meal out of people's screw ups, and there's a lot of shaming and humiliating going on. But there's so much to gain from those experiences. I mean, look back on your own lives. Haven't you learned more from screwing up than from getting things right and for everything to be plain sailing? And so I love this idea of taking broken items around to schools and using that as a method of teaching. It's really, really powerful. And I think before mistakes and failure was kind of trendy or allowed to exist, I think people really felt like they had to hide and deny their mistakes and sort of cover up. And that's what my guest from episode 38 alludes to, you know, this idea that we constantly have to put on a brave face and show like everything is great, which I think social media started out as being, you know, in the beginning, everyone was posting their best sides on social media. And as time is marching on, it feels like people are actually using social media as a way of saying, actually, you know what, I'm really different. I'm really unconventional. And I'm just going to proudly state that. So I think society is changing. But before then, we really had to live an inauthentic existence in order to be part of a group. This from episode 38.
I would censor myself, and I would, you know, hold a belief maybe in my mind, but I wouldn't necessarily share that belief. But there was, you know, essentially so many of these experiences accumulated over the time that I was in active practice, and I've shifted out. So now I'm writing. I have this tech company. I had a journey through an international medical nonprofit, which I co-founded and scaled, you know, globally. So I have had an alternative, I would say, career path.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I had put a little bit of distance behind me that I realized how much of my true beliefs and feelings I had been, you know, editing, curating, suppressing, out of us really what was fear of being rejected, fear of not, fear of ridicule, you know, because there's a lot of that as well. There's this groupthink mentality. And when people start expressing thoughts and feelings that are outside of that, they become targets. And at that time in my life, I didn't possess, you know, really, I don't know what it is, the courage to just unapologetically, you know, state my views.
So I think it is really essential to stop apologizing, not because you're not sorry, but just because the process of apologizing almost hands the power to the person you're apologizing to. And I think there has to be a major review, and this is something I'm definitely going through myself, where I actually stop and just go, hold on, does this actually require an apology? Because, first of all, I definitely shouldn't be apologizing for being me. But also, I put so much time and effort into trying to be a person of integrity, trying to always approach life to the best of my abilities. And so by apologizing, it's almost cancelling out all those efforts I make. And so, for me now, I really think twice about apologizing, because I don't do many things unconsciously. A lot of the things I do, just everything I do very consciously. Like, I'm very aware of my words and my behavior and my actions. And as a result of being very aware of those things, I really struggle to apologize because, let's just say I say something I regret. I mean, that just doesn't happen these days, because when I say something, I really want to say what I'm saying. And even if it might not be easy to hear, or someone may not take what I'm saying kindly, I've really reviewed and assessed whether what I'm saying is really what I want to say. And so that's why I apologize less these days. There are times, though, I can get really emotional, I can get really angry, I can be really upset, and then I say something in the heat of the moment, which, if I had been more calm and serene and a bit more in control of my emotions, I probably wouldn't have said. And that's the time when I do apologize, and I, definitely make amends, and I say, I didn't mean to say that, and what I said was wrong, and I definitely apologize then. So this isn't a case of never apologizing for making mistakes. I certainly do when it's appropriate, but I don't go around just constantly apologizing for my existence. That's something that, I see women and minority groups doing a lot, and it's just old-fashioned. It's out of date now. And so I love this soundbite from episode 88, where she just summarizes this new mentality of not apologizing in a very succinct and plain way.
And I think if we sort of take a step back and go, okay, I've apologized, what can I learn from it? And what should I do in order to prevent myself from making the same mistake? And I think if we just change the language that we use on ourselves, I think we can come a long way.
It's definitely a case of how we talk to ourselves. I mean, apologizing comes from within. And so if we change our attitudes to be one that doesn't constantly beat ourselves up and hold ourselves to unfair standards and is very self-critical and self-judgmental, then maybe we might apologize less. I mean, this is really tied in with accepting oneself and being in charge of one's own conduct, really. And yeah, I never actually thought that until saying that just now. And it's really deeply fascinating, because I think if you can change your inner landscape to be more self-loving and self-compassionate, I think we would actually feel the need to apologize to others less. And so this quote from episode 74 is along the same lines. And again, she just puts it really succinctly as to when apologies are necessary and when they're not. I thought being independent was great, but actually...
that's such a British thing where you have to apologise for everything even though you've done nothing wrong. It's oops, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
if you think you've got it, then you've got it. Go do it. And if you make a boo-boo or anything, like, just fix it and carry on.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly the way we talk to ourselves, which is really, really tricky. I think a lot of the way we behave and a lot of the things we say and a lot of our actions are driven about the way we feel about ourselves. And it's interesting hearing again from my guest from episode 19, because she talks a lot about the way she talks to her girls and her daughters. But her real education is applying that same gentle, kind approach with her family and the people she loves and the people that are important to her, to herself. So if she was to talk to herself the way she talks to her daughters, I think she'd have an easier time. And, you know, it affects the way we feel about ourselves. And so this from episode 19, I think summarizes what I'm trying to say in a much more succinct way.
I try really hard myself to talk to girls as, just the same as anyone, right? Like asking them what they're thinking and what are you feeling about this and validating their feelings and their emotions. I think that what I see is that girls, just like I feel actually, they have a tendency to apologize for their opinions. So it's a matter of just saying your opinion is valid and I want to hear your thoughts.
Our opinions are valid. You know, the way we feel about ourselves, whether it's good and bad, is perfectly valid. I mean, we're allowed to have emotions, we're allowed to feel wobbly, we're allowed to feel confident, and we're allowed to feel everything in between those states. And, you know, we shouldn't be feeling sorry. I think so many messages we receive from media and social and friends and family is all about trying to present ourselves in the best light, you know, showing that we've really got this, that we're on top of everything, that we're in control. And I think when we don't feel any of those empowered feelings, we feel bad and then we start apologizing. And actually it snowballs where you end up just feeling rubbish all the time. So I think the lesson is in self-acceptance and letting yourself off the hook, you know, just not being so tough on oneself. And, you know, when we're able to do that, I think the apologizing will stop and we'll actually move into a place of self-love, self-compassion, self-respect, self-regard. And, you know, we'll just be all-round nicer people to deal with, who are confident and have self-esteem and self-assured. I can really see how that works in theory. And we're about to hear from a guest from episode 54 who I think has cracked this perspective of herself. And as always, you know, the theory is kind of easy to rationalize, but the actual doing is not so easy. But let's hear from my guest from episode 54.
The reality of the situation, though, is I'm sitting here right now in a ponytail, and I don't think I brushed my teeth yet this morning. You know, my house always, to some degree, looks like the middle of a tornado. I'm really, really lucky when I get like 10 minutes to myself in a day. And I fall asleep on my computer more often than not when I shouldn't be. And I'm always apologizing to somebody for something I've forgotten. But I wouldn't have it any other way. I get to experience and love a lot of different things.
This episode of Innervation started out being about stopping the apologies, but it's actually yet another process of self-acceptance, loving yourself the way you are, not feeling bad for your shortcomings, your defects, your areas where you could do a little bit more work, realizing that we're all works in progress and that it's not about reaching levels of perfection, but actually it's about self-love and self-acceptance and loving the skin you're in and celebrating the person you are and realising that you're absolutely wonderful just as you are. Yes, I'm sure you could be more of something, better at something, and be growing and evolving every single day. But that doesn't mean that you need to apologise all the way up until the point of when you get to your goals and you reach your ambitions. So think twice about apologising. You only need to apologise when you've really done something wrong and you acknowledge that what you've done is wrong. I think apologising in those times is extremely empowering because it shows a huge level of self-awareness. And that's what innovation is all about. It's developing that self-awareness of who we are so that we can live with integrity and be the best versions of ourselves that we can be. Thank you so much for listening this week. Please do subscribe to this podcast and maybe even rate and review it if you can. I'd love to have your feedback about this episode or any others that you've listened to, and maybe some suggestions about future topics for this show. It's all about self-discovery and evolution on innovation, so be kind and loving to yourselves, and I wish you all a great week.